The restroom door slammed shut, and my heart stopped. I was alone with my boss, Ethan, his breath heavy with whiskey and something else. Something dangerous. In the dim light of the bar's grimy restroom, his eyes locked onto mine, and I knew nothing would ever be the same. My name is Caleb Nguyen, 28, a graphic designer scraping by in Seattle's tech scene. I'd been working at Horizon Creative for 2 years, grinding through late nights and Ethan Caldwell's impossible demands. Ethan, 32, was the kind of boss who could charm a client into signing $1 million deal and then chew out an intern for a typo in the same breath. Tall, with sharp cheekbones and piercing green eyes, he was magnetic and terrifying. Everyone at the agency whispered about him. Brilliant, ruthless, untouchable. I was just another cog in his machine, or so I thought, until that night at the Rusty Anchor. It was a Friday, and the team had dragged ourselves to the bar after a brutal week. We just landed a major contract with a sustainable fashion brand, and Ethan insisted on team bonding. I wasn't much for drinking, but I showed up, nursing a soda while my coworkers downed shots. Ethan was in rare form, laughing too loudly, his tie loosened. His sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that I tried not to notice. I kept my head down, sketching doodles on a napkin, hoping to slip out early. Caleb. Ethan's voice cut through the noise, low and deliberate. You're quiet tonight. Something on your mind. His gaze pinned me to the bar stool. I mumbled something about being tired, but he didn't let it go. Walk with me, he said, standing abruptly. Before I could protest, he was heading toward the back of the bar, and I followed like a moth to a flame. The restroom was small, the kind of place where the fluorescent light flickered and the mirror was cracked. Ethan leaned against the sink, blocking the door. You've been avoiding me, he said, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. I laughed nervously, denying it, but my stomach twisted. I had been avoiding him, not because I disliked him, but because I liked him too much. Ethan was everything I wasn't. Confident, powerful, unapologetic. And I was, well, me, a Vietnamese-American kid from Tacoma who'd spent his life hiding who he was. I see you, Caleb, he said, stepping closer. You think you're invisible, but you're not. His hand grazed my arm, and I froze. Was this a test? A trap? My mind raced, but my body betrayed me, leaning into his touch. Then he kissed me, hard, desperate, like he'd been holding it back for months. The world tilted, and for a moment, I kissed him back, lost in the heat of it. But then reality crashed in. This was my boss. This was wrong. I pushed him away, my breath ragged, and bolted out the door. Back at my apartment, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. We need to talk. Tomorrow. I ignored it, but the memory of his lips burned into me. I'd spent years burying my feelings, telling myself I could live without love, without being seen. Growing up, I'd watched my parents struggle, their immigrant dreams clashing with a world that didn't always welcome them. I learned to stay quiet, to blend in, to never ask for more. But Ethan had seen me, and now I couldn't unsee myself. The next morning, I dragged myself to work, dreading the inevitable. Ethan was already in his office, his usual polished self, but his eyes lingered on me during the morning meeting. I avoided him all day, burying myself in design edits, but by 5 p.m. he cornered me in the break room. Caleb, we can't pretend it didn't happen, he said, his voice low. I don't want to. I wanted to scream that he didn't get it. He was out, proud, the kind of gay man who could walk into a room and own it. I was still half in the closet, terrified of what it meant to be open, to be vulnerable. You're my boss, I said finally. This can't happen. He looked like I'd slapped him, but he nodded and walked away. That night, I went to my best friend Maya's apartment. Maya Torres, 29, was a bartender with a sharp tongue and a heart bigger than Seattle. She'd been my rock since college, the only person who knew I was gay. Over cheap wine, I spilled everything. "He kissed you?" she said, eyes wide. "In a bar restroom? Caleb, that's some rom-com level drama." But her face softened when she saw my panic. "You like him, don't you?" I didn't want to admit it, but I did. Ethan wasn't just my boss. He was someone who saw the world in bold colors, who pushed me to be better, who made me feel alive. But the power dynamic, the fear of being exposed, it was too much. Maya hugged me and said, "You deserve to be happy, Caleb. Don't let fear win." The next week was torture. Ethan kept his distance, but every glance felt like a question. I threw myself into work, redesigning the fashion brand's campaign until my eyes burned. One night, I stayed late, the office empty except for me and the hum of my computer. Around 9 p.m., Ethan appeared, his coat slung over his shoulder. "You're killing yourself over this project," he said. "Why?" "Because it's safe," I snapped, surprising myself. "Unlike you." His face fell, and for the first time, I saw the man behind the mask. Someone who was just as scared as I was. He sat down across from me and we talked. Not about work, but about everything. His childhood in Chicago, my summers helping my mom at her nail salon, the weight of expectations we both carried. For the first time, I felt like we were equals. As we left the office, he stopped me under the streetlights. "I'm sorry," he said. "I shouldn't have kissed you like that, but I don't regret it." My heart pounded, but I didn't run this time. I took his hand, just for a moment, and it felt like a promise. The days after that night under the streetlights were a blur of stolen glances and unspoken tension. Ethan and I didn't talk about it again, but something had shifted. At work, he was still the commanding boss, barking orders and charming clients, but now I caught him watching me when he thought I wasn't looking. His eyes held a question I wasn't ready to answer. I threw myself into the fashion campaign, hoping work would drown out the noise in my head. The sustainable brand, Green Thread, wanted bold, authentic visuals that screamed individuality. I spent hours sketching concepts, blending vibrant patterns with muted earth tones to reflect their eco-friendly mission. But every time I presented a draft to Ethan, his feedback was sharp, almost personal. "This is good, Caleb," he'd say, leaning over my desk, his voice low. "But it's not you." I didn't know what he meant, and it frustrated me. How could I put myself into a design when I was still figuring out who I was? One evening, I stayed late again, tweaking a logo. The office was quiet, the Seattle skyline glittering through the windows. Ethan appeared, holding 2 takeout coffees. "Truce," he said, offering one. I took it, our fingers brushing, and my pulse spiked. We sat on the office couch, the city humming below us, and talked about nothing: movies, music, the best taco truck in town. It was easy, too easy, and I hated how much I wanted it to last. "Caleb," he said finally, his voice softer, "I don't want to push you, but I can't stop thinking about you." My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him I felt the same, but the words stuck. Instead, I stood and mumbled something about needing to finish my work. He didn't stop me, but his silence followed me home. The next day, I met Maya for lunch at a diner near her bar. She saw right through my fake smile. "You're falling for him," she said, stealing a fry from my plate. "And you're freaking out." I didn't deny it. I told her about the coffee, the late-night talks, the way Ethan made me feel seen and terrified all at once. "He's your boss," she said, echoing my own fears. "But he's also a person. Maybe he's worth the risk." I wasn't so sure. Growing up, I'd seen what happened when people took risks. My parents had poured their savings into a small restaurant, only to lose it to a bad lease. They taught me to play it safe, to keep my head down. Being gay in a conservative community hadn't helped. I'd spent high school dodging slurs and pretending to be someone I wasn't. Ethan, with his confidence and openness, was a world I didn't know how to navigate. That Friday, the team went back to the Rusty Anchor. I almost didn't go, but Maya texted me, "Don't hide, Caleb. Live a little." So I showed up, wearing my best attempt at casual, a black button-up and jeans. Ethan was there, laughing with the team, but his eyes found mine across the room. My heart did that stupid flip again. Halfway through the night, I stepped outside for air. The bar's neon sign buzzed above me, casting a red glow on the wet pavement. Ethan followed. "You're running again," he said, his breath visible in the chilly air. I shook my head, but he stepped closer. "Tell me you don't feel this," he said, his voice raw. "Tell me, and I'll back off." Couldn't. Instead, I kissed him. It was softer than the restroom kiss, tentative, but it felt right. When we pulled back, he smiled, and for the first time, I saw hope in his eyes. But then a coworker's voice called from the bar, and reality snapped back. We couldn't do this, not here, not now. The next week, Ethan called me into his office. I braced for the worst, but he just handed me a folder. "Green Thread loved your latest designs," he said. "They want you to present at their launch event." I was stunned. Me? Presenting? I'd always stayed behind the scenes. "You've got something special, Caleb," he said. "Stop hiding it." The launch event was in a sleek downtown loft, all exposed brick and fairy lights. I wore a suit for the first time in years, my hands sweaty as I set up my slides. Ethan was there, working the room, but he kept glancing at me, his smile a quiet anchor. When I presented, I stumbled at first, but then I found my rhythm, talking about the designs with a passion I didn't know I had. The crowd applauded, and Ethan's proud nod made my chest ache. Afterward, we ended up on the rooftop, the city sprawling below us. "You were incredible," he said, his voice warm. "I knew you had it in you." I wanted to kiss him again, but the weight of our situation held me back. He was still my boss. I was still scared. But as we stood there, shoulder to shoulder, I felt a spark of courage I hadn't known I possessed. The Green Thread launch was a turning point, but it didn't make things simpler. If anything, my feelings for Ethan grew messier, tangled in fear and longing. At work, we kept it professional, but the air between us crackled. Every meeting, every casual brush of his hand, felt like a secret we were both keeping. I started noticing things about Ethan I hadn't before. The way he fidgeted with his pen when he was nervous. The way he stayed late to help a struggling intern. He wasn't just the untouchable boss. He was human, flawed, and trying. It made me want him more, and fear him more. What if this blew up? What if I lost my job, my privacy, everything I'd built? One night, I went to Maya's bar to clear my head. She slid a beer across the counter and said, "You look like you're carrying the world, Caleb." I told her about the rooftop, the way Ethan's pride had made me feel invincible and terrified. "You're allowed to want this," she said, "but you've got to figure out what this is." I didn't have an answer. The next day, Ethan asked me to join him for a client dinner. It was a big deal. Green Thread's CEO, a woman named Priya Sharma, wanted to discuss expanding the campaign. We met at a fancy restaurant overlooking Lake Union, all glass and candlelight. Priya, 45, was warm but sharp, asking pointed questions about my designs. Ethan jumped in, praising my work with a sincerity that made my face burn. Under the table, his knee brushed mine, and I didn't pull away. After dinner, Priya left, and Ethan and I stayed for a drink. The lake sparkled outside, reflecting the city's lights. "You were amazing tonight," he said, his voice low. "You're more than you let yourself be, Caleb." I wanted to argue, but his hand found mine on the table, and I let it stay. We sat there, fingers intertwined, until the waiter's cough broke the spell. The next morning, I woke to a company-wide email. Horizon Creative was restructuring, and Ethan was stepping down as creative director to focus on client relations. A new director, some hotshot from New York, was taking over. The news hit me like a punch. Was this because of us? Had I cost him his job? I stormed into his office, closing the door behind me. "Did you do this because of me?" I demanded. Ethan looked tired, his tie undone. "No," he said. "It's been coming for a while. I'm burned out, Caleb. I want to build something real, not just chase deadlines." He paused, his eyes searching mine. "And yeah, maybe I want to make this, us, possible." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was relieved. The power dynamic was gone. But another part was terrified. Without the boss-employee barrier, what was my excuse for holding back? I left his office without answering, my head spinning. That weekend, I went to visit my parents in Tacoma. Their small house smelled like lemongrass and laundry detergent, a comfort I hadn't realized I missed. Over dinner, my mom asked why I seemed so distracted. I wanted to tell her about Ethan, about the chaos in my heart, but I couldn't. They didn't know I was gay, and the thought of disappointing them was unbearable. On Sunday, Ethan texted me, "Meet me at Gasworks Park. Please." I almost didn't go, but something pulled me there. The park was quiet, the old industrial structures silhouetted against the sunset. Ethan was waiting by the water, his blonde hair catching the light. "I'm not your boss anymore," he said. "So tell me what you want." I wanted to run, to hide, but his honesty pinned me in place. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Of this, of being out, of messing it up." He stepped closer, his hand brushing my cheek. "I'm scared too," he said. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." This time, when he kissed me, I didn't pull away. The world didn't end. It just felt right. Dating Ethan was like stepping into a storm. Beautiful, chaotic, and overwhelming. We kept it quiet at first, meeting for coffee in out-of-the-way cafes or walks along the waterfront. Every touch, every laugh, felt like a rebellion against the fear I'd carried for years. But the world wasn't as kind as those moments. At work, the new creative director, Lauren Baxter, was a whirlwind. A 38-year-old black woman with a no-nonsense attitude. She pushed the team hard, and I respected her for it. But I could feel the whispers when Ethan and I were in the same room. People noticed the way we looked at each other, the way he lingered near my desk. One coworker, a designer named Jared, made a snide comment about special treatment. I brushed it off, but it stung. Ethan noticed my tension. One night, at his apartment in Capitol Hill, he pulled me onto the couch. "Talk to me," he said, his hands warm on mine. I told him about Jared, about the fear of being outed at work. "Let them talk," he said. "We're not doing anything wrong." But I wasn't so sure. I'd spent so long hiding, and now I felt exposed, like a nerve laid bare. Things came to a head at the company's annual gala. It was held at a swanky hotel downtown, all chandeliers and overpriced wine. Ethan and I arrived separately, but he found me by the bar, looking unfairly good in a tailored suit. "Dance with me," he said, his smile daring. I hesitated. Everyone was watching, but he took my hand, and we stepped onto the dance floor. For 3 minutes, it was just us, moving to a slow jazz tune, his hand steady on my waist. I forgot the stares, the whispers, the fear. But afterward, Lauren pulled me aside. "Caleb, you're talented," she said, her voice firm but kind. "But people are talking. Be careful." Her words hit hard. I knew she was trying to protect me, but it felt like a warning. That night, I told Ethan I needed space. He looked hurt but nodded. "I'll wait," he said, "as long as it takes." The next week was hell. I avoided Ethan, threw myself into work, and ignored Maya's texts. But the loneliness was crushing. I missed him, his laugh, his warmth, the way he challenged me to be more. One night, I found myself at the Rusty Anchor, staring at the spot where it all began. Maya found me there, sliding into the booth across from me. "You're an idiot," she said, but her eyes were soft. "You've got something real. Don't throw it away." She was right. I'd been running from myself, not just Ethan. The next day, I went to his apartment. He opened the door, looking tired but hopeful. "I'm done hiding," I said. "I want this. I want us." His smile was like the sun breaking through clouds. We kissed, and for the first time I wasn't afraid. Being with Ethan wasn't perfect, but it was real. We went public at work, and yeah, there were whispers, but most people were kind. Lauren even pulled me aside to say she admired my courage. Jared apologized, and I let it go. Life didn't magically get easier, but it felt fuller, brighter. I came out to my parents a month later. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Sitting at their kitchen table, my hands shaking as I told them who I was. My mom cried, but not out of anger. She was scared for me, for the world's cruelty. My dad was quiet, but he hugged me before I left, and that was enough for now. Ethan and I kept building our life, one moment at a time. We moved in together, a small apartment with a view of the Sound. I kept designing, landing bigger projects, finding my voice. Ethan started a consulting firm, helping small businesses with branding. We fought sometimes about money, about time, about my stubborn need to do everything alone, but we always came back to each other. One evening, we went back to Gasworks Park, where it all clicked into place. The sunset was painting the sky in pinks and golds, and Ethan took my hand. "You changed everything," he said, echoing the words that had haunted me since that night in the bar. "You made me want to be better." I laughed, tears in my eyes, and told him he'd done the same for me. As we stood there, I thought about the boy who'd spent his life hiding, afraid of his own heart. I wasn't that boy anymore. Love hadn't erased the fear or the pain, but it had given me something stronger. The courage to be seen, to be loved, to be me. And that was worth everything.